What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we have another double feature, supernatural happenings, and then more on vampires. I have come across so many times in my research people positing theories about how some extraterrestrials, mainly the alien greys we have all come to know and love so well, are perhaps paranormal in nature and not extraterrestrial at all. Now, I'll admit, at first I scoffed at the idea, but then I did look a bit further into it. I'm not really sure where my final thoughts lie, and to be honest, I still believe they could just as easily be neither paranormal nor extraterrestrial, or both at the same time. There are just too many unknowns still, at least in my opinion. Some people say there are just too many parallels between some of the things aliens, these ones specifically, get to doing here on Earth, and some things we already know, or at least we think we know, about the supernatural and paranormal in general. I mean, we all know what this generally entails, right? Some poor soul wakes up in the dead of night or the wee hours of the morning and they aren't able to move a muscle, aside from maybe their eyeballs. Now, there are many different scenarios here, many different ways that this could go, but let's discuss when this happens and they suddenly realize that on top of not being able to move, they are completely surrounded in this most vulnerable state by big-headed, giant, black-eyed, spindly, and somewhat ragged-looking creatures, possibly from another planet, another realm. Every once in a while, someone will come forward and claim that the experiments done on them were done right there in the room with them. And therefore, the term or the word abduction doesn't really fit here. But I'm sure this is still a very harrowing ordeal to have to be put through. This is especially true when it happens in the bedroom, because this is not only where we are the most vulnerable, but also where we should feel the most safe and at home. Most of the time, however, these victims are taken aboard some sort of alien craft. We used to call them flying saucers, and now we refer to them as UFO. How this happens is different across the board, with some people being moved directly through walls, and there are also some cases where the victim claims that there was no more roof on their home at that moment, and when they opened their eyes and looked up, they didn't see the roof, but all they could see was sky. They laid there and looked up and there was no roof, just sky, and the outside from where they were laying in their beds and looking up. Once they are returned, though, the roof is back intact and like it was never gone. Once the victim is taken aboard the craft, it seems that things get even more terrifying than when they woke up to creatures from another planet surrounding their paralyzed body while they laid in their very own beds. As if it could get scarier than that, but it definitely does. The sexual experiments, the seeming genetic experiments, I mean, the list goes on and on of the tortures people have reported being put through and experiencing during these alien abductions. They're basically treated like lab rats, and they have sperm, eggs, blood, and other genetic materials taken from them in the most horrific and painful, torturous of ways. Things being shoved up their noses or some other orifice, and they're usually strapped down or otherwise unable to move. I mean, it's just unfathomable to those of us who have never experienced it for ourselves, or I dare say those of us who cannot remember because we were given a screen or had our memories wiped. I'm just saying. Once it's all over, though, the victim or abductee finds themselves back in their beds and having no idea how they got there, or if it was all some sort of terrible nightmare or something. However, this delusion of it not having happened doesn't last for long, because oftentimes they are implanted with something, and even when they aren't, there's almost always, like 99% of the time, some sort of physical evidence that these extraterrestrials left behind. Strange markings on their bodies that were never there before, or some other very obvious evidence that something did in fact take place to them. But was it paranormal, supernatural, extraterrestrial? What kind of otherworldly was it? I'm not here to solve that mystery. I just wanted to discuss it with you all. The scenario I just described is far off from being anything new, right? It's been happening, or at least seemingly so, since the beginning of time, more likely than not. I am reluctant to call this a sleep paralysis episode, but it kind of is in its own way. What I mean by that is that the person wakes from a dead sleep and can't move a muscle, and in most sleep paralysis victims, they are hyper aware that there is something in the room with them that's most likely causing the paralysis itself, and that it is somewhat evil or malevolent and has the same such intentions. Now, sleep paralysis has probably been around for just as long as the extraterrestrials have been visiting us, and throughout the centuries, we can even see it in literature. The old hag from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is just one example, and it's also been being reported for just as long, with the main aspects of it, according to the victims doing the reporting, being that they are paralyzed completely and that there is some sort of evil in the room with them. Regardless of whether or not they can see what this evil is completely irrelevant. This particular phenomenon is also reported throughout cultures all over the world, and again, all reporting the same shadowy and or strange beings and creatures and the total paralysis. Let's not forget about that part. I believe that for as long as it's been being reported, that's as long as humans have been searching for answers as to what exactly is happening during these episodes. Now, I just wrote an entire book on sleep paralysis and shadow entities, but as I mentioned in that book, shadow beings are far from being the only commonly experienced entity during sleep paralysis episodes. Many researchers, scientists, and even doctors try very hard to convince us that it's always a simple brain misfire during the REM stage of sleep, but most of us, given how widespread and seemingly ancient the phenomenon is, that explanation just isn't going to pacify us anymore, at least not those of us in this community or anyone else who has ever experienced the terror of it all before, even if it was only just one experience, just one time. I know it feels like I'm jumping all around here, guys, but try and stay with me. What about the Fae, who I've also written an entire book on? They have long since seemed to have had the same fascination as the extraterrestrials with humans, but basically and mainly with human reproduction. They've carried out countless sexual assaults against us, and they would even switch our healthy babies and children with their own sickly Fae creatures. The changelings. Most of the time though, and a lot of people don't know or don't realize this, they don't put it together, the changelings were actually not sickly babies at all, but elderly, ailing, and oftentimes infirmed elder Fae who were going to pass on anyway, so why not do it here on human turf while also having gained a brand new Fae child for themselves and their species, their brood or their kind, whatever you want to call it. I have often wondered if this had something to do with the fact that, like the aliens running and participating in the often discussed hybrid and seeding programs, they have issues with reproducing on their own and therefore might feel like they need to steal our children or trick us into sleeping with them in order to keep their own species going. Like, is there so much interbreeding or whatever? With the ETs, it makes sense, and I've said countless times, I'm not going to say it again, about how I believe they got so into technology on a planet just like Earth. They were just like us. They went underground. They couldn't live anymore, therefore couldn't reproduce. But I don't see that with the Fae. I think the Fae are just interbreeding way too much, and it's not going well for them, and hasn't been for an extremely long time. Only now, how do you switch a baby, right? That would be reported. There are some cases, at least 3 that I can think of, that I believe a Fae snatched a child from the woods. Maybe I'll discuss that with you guys. And I think at least one of the times, I don't know if it was all 3, the parents got in a lot of trouble if they weren't convicted for murder. They're like under suspicion. I went off on a total tangent, off script there, but something's going on with the Fae too, with reproduction. The ETs are so in our faces about it that we're forgetting about the Fae and anything else that is coming to experiment on or look into, that definitely has an interest in how we reproduce, our reproductive organs, things like that. It's very obvious with ETs. Of course, I'm not sure of any of this, mind you, but I feel as though these are at least educated guesses, or so I hope. In fact, it's a huge and major part of real fairy legend and lore that they have a terrible time at trying to reproduce on their own by any sort of natural means, meaning Fae and Fae, no way. I don't know where that came from, but it kind of makes sense. Fae and Fae, no way. I don't know. Let's roll with it, guys. Severe deformities, loss of pregnancy blight their attempts, and while that would under any other circumstance be a terrible and tragic thing that we would sympathize with and pity, under these circumstances, given the abductions of human babies and children all over the world, I'm hard pressed to feel sorry for them at all. After all, too, the Fae are not really known for their kindness and compassion towards us, humanity, the human race, the collective, right? At least for the most part. The fact that they would try to introduce human blood into their gene pools in order to strengthen their own DNA isn't a surprise, though, as the continuation of their species is first and foremost in their minds, which is very much understandable. It's relatable, right? We don't want the human race to every single person die, I don't think. And the stolen child that the changeling replaces is almost always married into Fey nobility when they're old enough, strengthening the royal stock, so to speak. There is one more thing, perhaps more than any other, that ties these two phenomena together. The phenomenon of abductions by and interactions with both extraterrestrials and fairies. And that's a whole other phenomenon altogether. Missing time, though. Just as with the ETs, when the human victim is returned to wherever it was initially taken from, they tend to realize almost immediately that they are missing several hours, and in extreme cases, several days, even weeks, and I've seen up to a few years. That's crazy. They thought that maybe they had been gone for 10 minutes, but came to find they had been gone for 2 weeks or 5 years. Sometimes there are weeks missing, and in some cases, like I said, years had gone by since the person was taken in the first place, when all the while they literally thought they had only been gone mere minutes or at most days. All of these things, missing time, abductions, both by fairy and ET, terrifying creatures visiting in the dead of night, reptilians and greys, fairies and goblins, all of it dates back centuries, and most likely since the beginning of time. It's beyond ancient, guys. It certainly predates the written word and probably goes back to just oral tradition and beyond. I mention a lot when speaking on the extraterrestrials in any capacity, the hieroglyphics in Egypt, that are absolutely ancient. They all depict these strange beings who we are coming to find more and more greatly resemble many of not only the fey creatures we have become so familiar with, but more often than not, and mainly, all sorts of extraterrestrial races that we have come to know and either love or loathe. The fact of the matter is, they've been visiting since before Bible times, probably since the dawn of man, because I believe they're older than us, both Fae, ET, like it's all unimaginably old, infinite even. And it's not that they don't die, it's just that they live for so long compared to us, they're almost immortal. That's my opinion on it. That's my take from my research, especially into the Fae. I mean, I wrote that whole book. I went above and beyond, I believe, in that book. And the Shadow Person and Sleep Paralysis book too that just came out, it's like, that's just my belief. I don't know if you guys don't agree, or if you do agree, please leave your opinions and comments in the comment section below. I love to read them. I don't always respond, but I do read them. So back to the sleep paralysis. During these alleged sleep paralysis episodes, people report many different beings, and 99.9% of the time, whatever the thing is, it's definitely evil and said to absolutely ooze malevolence. Shadow beings, the old hag, the big cat, incubus and succubus entities, flat out demons, for lack of a better word. I mean, I could make a list a mile long and still not cover every single entity that's ever been reported by someone dealing with sleep paralysis. Also, it's a little strange that there are some people that experience it all the time and others only once in a lifetime. But those people that experience it once in a lifetime, they're like, that was enough. So let's move on, while also staying in the same vein, to a very interesting theory I recently came across about the Men in Black. The list of theories as to what these men might actually be is almost as long as the above mentioned list of entities people have claimed to have encountered during sleep paralysis episodes. Many people believe they are extraterrestrial, but others have said that they could be demons, for lack of a better word, again I say, government agents, human or otherwise, time travelers, interdimensional interlopers, again I say, the list goes on. This theory I recently came across, though, says that perhaps they are normal human men most of the time. This is gonna blow your mind. Like, it blew my mind when I read this, and I had to bring it to you. This is a theory that I have not seen before, and that I think usually wouldn't even cross someone's mind. Even people who research them, and it's actually taken into consideration less than it's considered. But hear me out, because I find this all so incredibly fascinating and reasonable. Honestly, I'd never put this together or thought of this before, but I am convinced now that this might actually be the case sometimes. What if the men in black are human beings who every once in a while become overtaken or possessed by some sort of supernatural, extraterrestrial, or demonic force who use them to carry out some sort of terrifying chores only to be returned to their normal state of being immediately afterwards, having no memory whatsoever of whatever it was they had done while under the otherworldly entity's influence? Regardless of what that entity is, because realistically and in all honesty, it could be anything, multiple things, and it doesn't even matter which one of those is true at this point. I'm going to share with you guys a case now of someone who had an experience which could very well prove that this is exactly what's going on when it comes to the men in black. Let's take a look now at a man who has been researching in the field of ufology for a very long time, from what I understand. His name is Timothy Green Beckley, and he has research to back up his claim that the MIB are average human citizens who are, for one reason or another, placed under some sort of either possession or mind control that makes the subject more like a slave or robot, neither with any kind of memory as to what had been done to them or what they had as a result been doing to others. Kind of like I don't want to get conspiratorial here, but like the MK Ultra, or like someone's activated, like they're perfectly normal living their life and they pick up the phone and someone says like pimp juice and they're like must go threaten witness. I don't know, guys. I'm being facetious again, but I do really want to latch onto this theory. Something about it just makes perfect sense to me. This runs very deep. We are speaking here about the type of zombie-like person we've only ever come across, I think, in Haitian legends and lore. Maybe not only, but that's mostly where we see things like this. Timothy Green Beckley told Nick Redfern, as reported in Mysterious Universe, quote, "There was one case where I might have been threatened by a man in black. There was a publication I wrote for in the 1970s called Official UFO. They published their address in the magazine, so they did get a few crank visitors to the offices. One of these was a gentleman who claimed he was being stalked by the men in black," end quote. It wasn't long before Beckley encountered this MIB again, but what started off as a normal meeting turned into something else very quickly. And this is exactly as it's reported by Nick Redfern in Mysterious Universe. So some of the details I think are missing. I tried to find more, but I really couldn't on this particular theory. So bear with me, hang with me, as you guys do. You know me, scatterbrain. So throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Beckley received numerous threatening phone calls from this man. Now, how he knew it was this man, I'm sure I have no idea, but I trust this source material implicitly, so I'm going to keep relating this encounter story to you despite not having some of the more intricate details. Beckley said these phone calls were incredibly scary and disturbed him a great deal. Finally, he had had enough and called the police about it. Believe it or not, the cops found this man that was calling him and making these threats, this man in black, very quickly. And he was in fact a homeless guy who had been living on the streets of New York City at the time all of this was happening. He was actually sleeping somewhere in Grand Central Terminal. According to Timothy Beckley, he received almost constant harassing and threatening phone calls from this man. He said that the guy, quote, "must have called 50 times and left crazy, threatening messages that would go on and on and on. I spoke with his parents who were in Florida, and they said that although he wasn't always like this, every now and again, something came over him," end quote. To this, Beckley offers us a theory, and honestly, it gives me chills and fascinates me very, very much. He said of it all, quote, "With cases like this guy where something came over him, and with the MIB, it's like possession, where a paranormal force takes possession of the person and then they become the man in black, doing what the force wants them to do, but completely without their knowledge. Afterwards, they might not even remember any of it. These people are living on the fringes of society. They are very simple-minded people who can very easily be controlled and influenced. Someone, say, who might be living in some rundown apartment is taken over in a kind of trance, and then they become one of the men in black. They threaten someone, and then they go back to their normal life after the possession ends, and they don't remember it. But while they are under the control of whatever this is, they're not quite right. And like a zombie is the best way I can describe it," end quote. Beckley said they are undoubtedly driven by two things: an unrelenting need to feed and the desire for self-preservation. They need to feed on fear, though, and not actually flesh and blood. To what end, and whether or not it's for themselves or for the entity that's actually in control, again, I'm sure I don't know. I wonder, though, if it's the extraterrestrials who are overtaking these unfortunate people. Because, I mean, guys, look at what they are threatening witnesses about most of the time. Think about it. When do the MIB come out? When do they come out and make their usually pretty terrifying but never coming to happen threats? Unreliable threats, I would call them. It always has something to do with aliens and UFOs. Also, have any of you ever sleepwalked? I sometimes in the middle of the night used to do what's called sleep eating. And what happens is I would wake up usually in a mess and surrounded by random food in my bed. Normally it's like crackers or cookies, chips, some kind of snack food, but more often than not, there is a trail leading from the kitchen to my bedroom of crumbs and sometimes bags, things I've dropped. This made me think of the times it's been reported when someone offered an MIB something to eat or drink and they had no clue what it was. They didn't even know what a fork was, or they tried to drink Jello or whatever the case may be. Also, if you don't sleepwalk or sleep eat like me, how about that feeling you get in sleep paralysis where you're just trying to move so hard or just do something to snap yourself out of it, and though we aren't sleeping but wide awake during these episodes, sometimes we feel as though we are trying to wake ourselves up. Okay, so laying there and you just like keep dozing off, but you're trying to snap yourself out of it. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. I just hope I'm explaining it the right way. I wonder if that's why sometimes the MIB seem so very confused or just drained, and why they're so incredibly awkward. Could their subconscious somehow be trying to wake them up to what's actually going on, whether they're successful or not? There was that one story I told in one of my MIB videos where he was like, my battery is draining, must leave now, and like literally started shutting down like a computer in front of the human being he was there to threaten. I'm not sure, but whatever power they're under is strong, because I've come across some pretty bizarre and even some really scary encounters with the men in black, most of which I relayed to you guys. I also think of the women in black here too. They always have on, or at least most of the time they have on, a very obvious and really wiggy wig. And they smell bad. I mean, I don't know too many homeless people anymore, but the ones I did aren't like what you see on television, at least for the most part. And the majority of them didn't smell at all, let alone smell like these women are said to. Quote, death and embalming fluid, end quote, is how the smell is most often described. So, because this one was so short and the information was so sparse, I decided that since you guys like to be able to chat in Premiere so much, and it's lame to have like 12 minutes to do that, I am going to drag this one out a little bit by talking about one of my very favorite topics, and one that I've covered oh so many times here on this channel, vampires. That's right, I'm going there again. Vampires are a creature that almost everyone has at least heard of. Even if you have no idea what a psychic or energy vampire is, you more than likely know the traditional type, and that's the one that's akin to Nosferatu and the character created so long ago by Bram Stoker. Twilight? True Blood? Even if you have absolutely no interest in the subject, it's still something you've at the very least come across in passing even. The fact is though, and one of the most frustrating parts of all of this for me at least, is that the idea of what real vampires are is often dictated by Hollywood and our modern culture, TV shows, movies, and to a lesser extent nowadays even books. I mean, it's all well and good, and I love so many of these, but it makes it hard when you're trying to do some real research into a real creature and get some real facts about something or said creature. There's also those people who like to live as though they are vampires. They drink donor blood, but even they aren't what I'm referring to when I mention the hunt for real vampires. In fact, because they have become somewhat of a fan favorite and the favorite creature of the night for most of us, is the exact reason why figuring out the truth and going from there is so incredibly freaking impossible. It's almost impossible for most people, mainly outside of this community, but there are those who should know better as well. Vampires are such a part of modern day fiction that even the thought that they could possibly exist outside of that becomes almost nonsensical. Outside of this community, they've been so modernized, right, and become such a fan favorite. Like I said, they become so popular that a lot of people aren't even willing to consider that they exist. It's almost the same with werewolves, but I think werewolves are more believed in as an actual and real creature of the night than vampires, and that pisses me off. Team Edward, okay? I personally, firmly, and fully believe that this is exactly what these creatures of the night are betting and depending on too, in my opinion. And just by looking at the actual facts of things, we can plainly see that this may not be the case though. It may not be the case in that it really is quite possible that these old early legends came from somewhere and or something real. Just to look at other fantasy creatures or fairy tale stories we have come across throughout our lives, throughout this community, and even just here on this channel or in general. I think in the case of vampires, it could also have to do with how things have changed so drastically regarding them. Let's look at how this legend has evolved or devolved, depending on what you believe, a little bit of it at least, throughout the centuries and as far as pop culture goes. So, the old-timey vampire was normally dressed immaculately in a three-piece suit and oftentimes a top hat. The suit was black and there was a cloak worn over it, which was black as well, a cloak and or a cape. The vampire in question would be about middle-aged and didn't have quite the iconic standing that he has nowadays. No doubt in real life there would be thousands or even millions of groupies following the vampire around and begging to be turned into a progeny or companion. I'm being facetious again a little bit, but I mean, it probably would at the very least look like it did in True Blood, right? At least to a point. The book Dracula by Bram Stoker was published in 1897, and without it, we may not have the same fascination with the creature as we do now, because whether real vampires are in fact real or whether or not it all started with a figment of this one man's imagination, this is the book that introduced it into pop culture. Granted, there were rampant legends of blood-sucking creatures, beasts, and beings throughout the world, but this was something altogether different. Mind you, I said it's the book that introduced it to pop culture, and not that it was the first of its kind. In 1819, so about 80 whole years before Bram Stoker came along, a man named John William Polidori wrote The Vampire, a Tale. In this book, the main character, the vampire, was a man named Lord Ruthven. Lord Ruthven was a dangerous character who, upon even crossing paths with him, led the unfortunate person to be destined for some sort of tragedy, if it didn't mean death itself for them. Unfortunately, for years, people had mistakenly, somehow, again, don't have the answers, thought that this original work was penned by Lord Byron. How something like that could happen may be hard for us in this modern age to comprehend, but it could happen very easily and did happen very often back in the day. The two men did have a connection though, with Polidori being Lord Byron's doctor. He wrote a few other things too, but The Vampire, a Tale was written in 1816 and published 3 years later in 1819. Immediately, people all over the place were entranced by and fascinated with not only the character himself, but the idea of this new and modern day bloodsucker. Other writers jumped on the bandwagon fast, and I definitely believe that this Lord Ruthven was definitely at least some of the inspiration for Count Dracula. I know it was also Vlad the Impaler, guys. Okay, calm down. In 1847 in England, another vampire character destined for infamy appeared in a penny dreadful magazine, and his name was Varney the Vampire, and the title of this particular publication was The Feast of Blood. For those of you who don't know, real quick, let me tell you what a penny dreadful is/was. It is defined as, quote, a novel of violent adventure or crime, end quote, and it became synonymous with horror and gore at one point. It also, back in the day, only cost a penny. Now, that's only coming from an extremely brief Google search, so if any of y'all know something more or something different about the Penny Dreadful, leave it in any other comments below, please. So, Varney the Vampire Tale and the Penny Dreadful was a mega success, which just goes to show the fact that so many things have changed in such major ways since that time. People's fascination with characters and creatures like vampires was rampant even so long ago. In 1872, Joseph Sheridan brought to the legend the sexism and possibly the sex appeal more so than any other vampire publication of the day when he penned Carmilla. The vampire named Carmille is obsessed with and lusts after a human woman named Laura. However, and despite all of these others that predated it, there's absolutely no denying that Bram Stoker's tale, as I said in the beginning, really helped the vampire we have come to know and love now get its takeoff into modern culture and fiction. In 1931, Universal Studios released the movie Dracula starring Bela Lugosi. It was a hit, but it goes to show how this type of film was perceived by those who weren't a part of the large cult following, when they also released, shortly after, Son of Dracula and Dracula's Daughter. Also, Bela Lugosi played the Dracula character later on in a comedy featuring Abbott and Costello. Lou Costello is from my hometown of Paterson, New Jersey. I'm just saying, we have a park dedicated to him. In this Abbott and Costello, Bela Lugosi plays Dracula, and Abbott and Costello meet not only Bram Stoker's infamous character, they meet Frankenstein's monster as well. In Son of Dracula and Dracula's Daughter, Lugosi did not play the role either. I would love to discuss with you guys and talk about what happened to him, allegedly due to him playing the character in this movie, and also his overall and somewhat fanatical interest in the occult. Maybe one day soon I'll put something together on it. Without all of these earlier classics, and trust me, I left out quite a few here, Would we even have had things like True Blood, Twilight, or even the amazing Interview with a Vampire? I'm getting tongue-tied. Heck, would we even have any of the numerous books featuring the lovable yet deadly vampire Lestat? You know he's my favorite. I don't think so. I do not think so. What about Stephen King's Salem's Lot? Guys, oh my goodness. That movie absolutely terrified me as a child. I am not afraid of much, and in fact, I think shadow beings may come to the closest thing to me having any kind of fear to rise up in me. But that one scene where the little boy is tapping on the window, let me in. Ugh. Also, that creepy old man who at the end says, face the monster. I don't know, guys. It's freaking creepy, okay? Comment if you agree, actually. Jerusalem's Lot, Salem's Lot. Okay? That little creepy kid tapping on the window. Tell me it's not creepy. Look it up on YouTube. It's probably there. Did you guys know that the term vampire actually wasn't used in the English language until the 1700s? I believe I've discussed this in the last video I did on the subject of vampires, but I'll reiterate that the first known time it was ever used was in a novel titled Travels of Three English Gentlemen, which was written or published, I'm not sure which, in 1746. The idea of actual vampires, whether they're devastatingly handsome and suave or corpses reeking of rotting flesh, has been around probably since the dawn of time. This is another reason why I feel so strongly about the fact that they are out there lurking somewhere as creatures of the night. They don't want to be found out or seen, and therefore they're not. Heck, do we even know that there aren't real blood-sucking vampires living among us? There's really nothing to say that the sunlight thing goes either way. In some tales, they can walk among the living in the daylight and it has no effects. In others, it depends on the age of the vampire, meaning how long they have been a vampire, and some even go so far as to say they sparkle when in the sunlight. Woo! The main idea, though, is that they are completely unable, for one reason or another, to expose even a drop of their skin to direct sunlight without disintegrating into dust, in most cases. I believe they simply prefer the night, again, because they don't want to be found out and put on display. I mean, what if they aren't all nice at all? What if they're horrible and lost all of their humanity like the so-called Strigoi in the Vampire Academy books? What, nobody else reads young adult fiction around here at almost 40 years old? Just me? Okay. Moving on. Joseph McCabe brought our attention to the fact that the Lilith, the Lelu, and Lilitu of ancient Babylonia actually caused their victims to become severely anemic. This means that blood must have been taken from them to an extreme degree where they were now rendered sick with all the ills that come along with having a disease such as anemia. As someone who has been anemic on and off for most of my life, I can attest to how tired a person really gets all the time. We don't even become tired. We just kind of are tired, like, as a person. And always. Whoa, guys, as I wrote this, it just occurred to me that maybe my own anemia could have something to do with the undead lurking around and sucking my blood and then glamoring me like they did in True Blood to make me think something else was going on or that something else had happened. I mean, why not vampires, right? Why not? I've experienced and or come face to face with everything else almost throughout my entire life. That sudden thought just gave me a brand new avenue to investigate regarding people who are on and off anemic and the possible vampire connection. And I'm not kidding, like I'm not being facetious, I'm not joking right now. I'm gonna check out that connection. If I come across enough information, I'll let you all know what I find. Anyways, ancient Indian people from the continent believed in the Vitala. Despite being spirit forms, they were known by these people to drain the blood from not only the living, but also from fresh corpses, allegedly living and lurking in old cemeteries and overgrown graveyards. And once night fell, they would become sort of mini tornado, but also a sort of screw drill. I guess there was no embalming back then. Maybe it's a religious thing. I don't know, guys. I'm trying to be serious here, but also there are so many unknowns. I feel as though I just have to have some fun with the whole thing too, right? I mean, it's so unknown. How can I, sit here stone-faced like it's totally serious when I don't have any facts or evidence to back it up? As much as I research, as much as I want it, can I manifest it maybe? I don't know. Thousands of years ago in Greece, they had Empusa. Empusa is an interesting creature. While Lilith was similar in her lust for blood and sex, her lust for male stuff, Empusa was the same, but also she would devour her victims' flesh as well as the blood. They both drank the blood of their victims and neither discriminated as far as sex, both gender and the act itself. There was also a vampiress who was secretly said to be a lover of Zeus's back in the day in ancient Greece too. Her name was Lamia. Zeus is the Greek god of thunder, and Lamia preferred the flesh and blood of kids, the younger the better. Is this where the whole virgin blood thing came in so many, not only religions, but fairy tales and folklores as well? Maybe. I could go on and on and on here, guys, because across every single culture, all across the world, since the beginning of time, there are all sorts of different legends and all sorts of different types of vampires. And my main reason for bringing all of this to you today, besides my obsession with all things related to this subject more than any other, I wanted to show that just like with every other legend of every other supernatural being and or creature, it all stems from centuries ago and further, and more than likely is based on at least some semblance of the truth. I'm going to continue with this video and definitely go on more with this if you guys followed it and if you want me to. Okay, let me know if you like just kind of random discussional videos like this, or if you want me to present you with, you know, the usual like facts and evidence, even though there's not a lot in this community, but you know what I mean. The difference from this video to the other ones is very obvious, and I was trying something new out. So let me know how you enjoyed it. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video. Please give the thumbs up and share, guys. The thumbs up are way below the views, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. People aren't watching all the way through, and then when I stop doing pre-recorded, people get upset and they're like, I miss your pre-recorded. So throw me a freaking bone here, right? In the description box, you will find ways to donate to the channel: Cash App, PayPal, Patreon. If you donate $20 a month or more to Patreon, you get a mini print of me, which I didn't even know that, but I guess you do at some tier or another. I think it's the $20 tier. And you also will get once a month, as a thank you from me, a personal intuitive oracle reading if you should so want one. Also in the description box, you will find links to all 3 of my books: Missing the Fae Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and my newest book. Please buy it if you didn't already, because I think it's pretty amazing and I am damn proud of it: Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond. If you want autographed copies, hit me up, or for anything else, if you want to purchase a personal intuitive oracle reading or a face-to-face session with me through a video chat, GemmaJadeParanormal at gmail.com. Remember, I sell things like manifestation intention sprays, I sell war water, I sell moon water, I sell dark moon water, I sell crystal packets, whatever you guys need, hit me up and I can help you. Spell jars, protection mechanisms, witch salts, okay? So really into the metaphysical, trying to get the website up. It's been a ridiculous process. But there are ways to make orders, so let me know if you need anything metaphysical or spiritual. Again, GemmaJadeParanormal at gmail.com. Those books, the links to the Kindle and the paperback, if I didn't already say that, in the description box. Autographed copies through email, GemmaJadeParanormal at gmail.com. I may have just repeated myself. On Wednesday nights, come on in and see what Intuitive Oracle is all about. It's myself and Ghost Dragons from 7:15-ish, 7:30-ish p.m. Eastern Time to whenever we run out of people to read for, or 11:30-ish Eastern Time. I pull one random card for whoever comes in and wants one. You just wait in line and hang out with us. The chat is amazing. I pull a card for you, tell you what your week's going to be like. If I'm on point, purchase a reading. That is the whole point. You can get the card for free or suggested donation. I appreciate every single one of you that donate. The Amazon wishlist gift link is in the description box. All of you that have purchased spiritual helper boxes, manifestation intention sprays, those of you who have purchased the one-on-ones with me, those of you who contribute to my making money and doing what I love, and those of you who contribute your time and your friendship as well. On Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Chillax and Chat, myself and Ghost Dragons, and we're trying to bring on you guys, the chat, as guests. So check that out as well. Everything is Eastern Time. Be kind to yourself, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to each other and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're capable, I believe in you. You are worthy and deserving of love. You are abundant already. Abundance is your birthright as a human being. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time.